In the last episode, we see Carla standing in critical supply with Paul, surrounded by shelves that have been sealed since before either of them was born, and she tells him something that sounds like a routine inventory update. There should be 50 years of light bulbs left in here. Instead, there's 2. On the surface, that's just the engine of this week's mystery, a theft tied to a murder, moving the plot forward the way any procedural reveal would. But I kept getting stuck on the word should in that sentence. Should means someone calculated an exact number decades ago that this silo was never supposed to fall short of. That number changes what the actual mystery is here. A number calculated that precisely was always counting down to something specific, and that's the real question this whole show has been circling since season 1. Is there an actual plan underneath this world, a real date somebody's genuinely working toward? Or is someday it'll be safe, just something people say forever, with no real end in sight? This season just handed us a way to actually test that, hiding inside a light bulb count. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. Whoever stocked critical supply didn't guess at how long these bulbs needed to last. They calculated it closely enough that a trained head of supply can look at current stock and immediately know exactly how far off the real number is. The founders were tracking consumption that precisely, which raises a bigger question. Precise for what? A supply calculated down to the year is usually a countdown towards something specific, and the real question is what that something is, and whether it's as reassuring as it sounds at first. The secrecy around this is what actually makes it more than careful bookkeeping. Getting anything out of critical supply requires 3 separate approvals and the physical presence of the head of supply or their shadow. Empty boxes get kept on the shelf specifically so nobody browsing the room can work out what's actually been used. Carla says the information is too important for anyone to have. That's the real tell. This isn't ordinary inventory management. It's a number the silo has decided its own population isn't allowed to do the math on. And it's not just ordinary residents this secrecy is kept from, which is genuinely strange. It reaches into the head of supply's own department, the exact people whose job is managing these numbers every day. If the goal were simply avoiding public panic, trained specialists could still track the real countdown accurately while the number stayed away from everyone else. Instead, the system builds in confusion at the professional level too. Empty boxes, unclear records, layers of approval that exist as much to hide the total as to control who touches it. That's not crowd management. That's making sure nobody in the whole chain ever holds the complete picture at once. So, what would that number actually correspond to? Radioactive contamination from a major event typically needs a few hundred years before an area is safe again. The show isn't necessarily describing radiation specifically, but the comparison illustrates something useful. Catastrophic contamination usually comes with a real, calculable timeline attached to it, an actual point where conditions measurably improve instead of staying frozen forever. If the founders were working from something similar, a supply calculated with this much precision starts looking less like enough to last a while, and more like enough to last exactly as long as we expect this to take. A few other pieces of this world start fitting that same shape once you look at them again. The official reason cleaning exists at all is to keep the external sensor clear, maintaining the feed that lets the silo keep watching outside conditions. If there's a real timeline running underneath all of this, that sensor is a genuine instrument, not just a prop for a pleasant illusion. Something somebody upstairs is presumably still checking against whatever benchmark would actually mean it's safe to leave. The mayor's own ritual speech backs this up too, saying plainly that nobody knows when it will be safe to go outside. Only that today isn't that day. Read one way, that's just despair dressed up as ceremony. Read another way, it's a group of people repeating, generation after generation, that a specific future day exists, they just haven't reached it yet. The legacy sitting in every vault points the same direction. Preserving detailed knowledge of how to rebuild a functioning civilization only makes sense if somebody still expects that knowledge to actually get used one day. Nobody protects a rebuilding manual for centuries if they've already decided the world stays buried forever. Someone like Shirley or Knox goes through an ordinary day in mechanical with no idea. A calculated number is ticking down somewhere above them. They aren't living in the open-ended situation the official story describes. They're living inside somebody else's carefully tracked schedule, one they have no access to and no say in. The only reason they'd ever learn it exists at all is if something like this theft forces it into the open. That's a different kind of unfairness than just being lied to about the past. It's being kept from your own future while somebody else quietly holds the actual date. Put all of that together and the theory holds up further than expected. There's probably a real number in someone's head, a calculated point where the founders expect the surface to actually be survivable again, and the supply stockpiles were built to last exactly that long. That much survives real scrutiny. Where it stops holding up is the next step, the one that makes this theory feel comforting instead of just interesting. It's tempting to read all this precision as evidence of care, a system quietly counting down toward the day it can finally let everyone go home, using the safeguard only as a last resort because the real goal has always been keeping as many people alive as possible for that return. But the show gives you a direct, current test for that reading, and it doesn't pass. Right now, this season, Camille comes back from the one place in this world with real answers and tells her husband that Juliet, Bernard, and Lucas all represent existential threats to the silo. Her solution is to deal with them, and everyone in that scene understands that word means killing Juliet and Bernard specifically. These are exactly the three people who currently know the most about what's actually happening in this system. If the real priority were preserving knowledge and people for some eventual future, they're the last three anyone would want dead. Instead, removing them is the first instinct the moment they become inconvenient. The clearest version of this same test already happened once, and it failed even harder. An entire cluster of silos beat the safeguard outright, jamming the signal so gas wasn't even an option anymore. The system's response wasn't relief at having 11 populations survive its worst weapon. It was demolishing that entire cluster by whatever means were left. A system actually trying to save the largest possible number of people doesn't destroy the one group that just proved it could survive its own extinction protocol. That only makes sense if what's actually being protected is the secret itself, not the people who might eventually benefit from it. The other side of this deserves a fair hearing before going further. Camille wanting Juliet and Bernard gone could just be one frightened woman protecting her own family, not proof of the whole system's real priority. Silo 40's destruction might have been about stopping an active uprising before it spread, not punishing a population for beating the safeguard specifically. Neither moment alone proves the system values secrecy over survival as a rule, but both point the same direction independently. One from a person acting on orders from the top, one from the top acting directly, and that kind of agreement across two very different moments is exactly the evidence a real theory needs. Which brings the lightbulb math back around to something colder than where it started. The same extreme secrecy protecting critical supplies numbers is protecting the silo's timeline from its own residents. That's what control looks like, not a system getting ready to eventually loop everyone in. A group actually building toward a real return date has every reason to eventually prepare its population for that day. A group that hides its own supply team from the true numbers, using the excuse that the information is too dangerous, is optimizing for something else entirely. The precision is real. Someone calculated exactly how long these supplies needed to last, which means there's a genuine number driving decisions in this world instead of a vague hope. Things will work out eventually. What doesn't survive contact with the evidence is the kinder ending people want attached to that number. Every time this system gets the choice between protecting people and protecting the secret of when they might actually be free, it protects the secret. It's doing that right now, this season, not just in some founding era decision nobody currently running things had any part in, which makes the current mystery hit differently. Someone's been stealing years off a countdown nobody in supply was ever supposed to be able to calculate in the first place, and it's already cost one investigator her life. The suspicion currently points at the Harwoods, and that actually matters given who Ed Harwood is. He's the same man whose entire job is reading physical evidence other people miss, tunnel wear, structural stress, the kind of detail that already contradicts this silo's official founding story once you look closely. If anyone in Silo 18 was positioned to work out the real shape of that countdown on his own, my money's on him. Whether his family stealing from critical supply means they'd already done that math themselves, or something else entirely, is genuinely unconfirmed. But he's exactly the kind of person you'd expect to end up tangled in a secret this specific. So where did all those stolen light bulbs actually go? There's a theory here too, and it doesn't even need the books. Ed Harwood runs the mines, which gives him a completely legitimate reason to be down in tunnels most residents never see, the same kind of tunnel this channel has already connected to a hidden network, possibly built to link this silo to others. Sustained digging over any real distance needs one thing more than almost anything else: reliable light for years at a stretch, in a place with no natural light at all. If the Harwoods found evidence of that older tunnel network, the same one only 4 people in this show's history have ever stumbled onto, powering an extended dig with grow light bulbs meant to last decades is exactly the resource a project like that would need. That's speculation stacked on speculation, worth saying plainly rather than dressing up as more than it is. But it's the specific kind of speculation that would explain both mysteries at once: why someone would risk stealing something this particular, and where years of rationed light actually went instead of just vanishing. Whether the Harwoods are actually behind it or just the ones holding evidence when it mattered, The timing lines up with everything else this season keeps confirming. The math only proves a plan exists. It says nothing about whether that plan is kind.